So you want to own an outdoor gear shop. You've already got the picture in your head. Cedar shelving, a wall of boots, coffee going in the back, somebody's dog asleep by the register, topo maps of the local range pinned up behind the counter. A guy walks in for a rain jacket and walks out 40 minutes later with a rain jacket and a plan for the weekend, and he got both from you. That's the picture. Now here's the building. The building is about 2,000 square feet of merchandise you paid cash for last spring. It will not sell until next spring. It's in sizes you guessed at, in colors chosen by a designer in Portland 11 months before your first customer ever touched the door handle. That's not a store, that's a wager, and you already placed it. The cheap version of this business runs about $150,000 to open, and most of that is stock you can't return. The expensive version is REI, which did $3.5 billion in sales last year and lost $54 million doing it. And running between those two numbers is a single piece of arithmetic that decides who lives. It isn't margin. Everybody obsesses over margin. It's the round trip. How many times a year does the money you spent turn back into money you have? A grocery store makes that trip 12 to 15 times a year. Dick's Sporting Goods, the largest sporting goods retailer in America, made it 2.5 times. 2.5. So let's do this properly. What it costs to open the doors. What it costs to keep them open. Who made it work, who got buried by it, and why the single hardest thing to sell in a gear shop is the one thing that can't be shipped. Start with the doors. Retail space in this country averages roughly $25 a square foot per year, and almost every retail lease you'll be offered is triple net, which means that number is the beginning of the conversation and not the end of it. On top of base rent, you're paying your share of property taxes, building insurance, and common area maintenance. Budget another $5 to $10 a foot. An 1,800 square foot shop, before you've hung a single jacket, is $55,000 to $65,000 a year in occupancy. Then build out. Fixtures, lighting, flooring, a fitting area, a boot bench, a counter. $30,000 to $75,000, and it goes higher fast the moment you touch plumbing or electrical. Then the systems. Point of sale with real inventory management, because a gear shop lives and dies on knowing what's in the back room. A merchant account, a business license, a seller's permit, general liability coverage, and property coverage on the stock itself. Then the stock. You'll find blogs telling you that opening inventory for an outdoor store runs $20,000. $20,000 buys you a booth at a farmer's market. A real shop, one that can actually fit a customer in a boot instead of apologizing to them, needs $80,000 to $200,000 at wholesale cost. And it needs depth. Depth is the expensive part. Nobody comes in for a size 10. They come in for a size 10.5. Wide, and if you don't have it, they've already got their phone out. Add it up honestly, and you're looking at $200,000 to $350,000 to open a small outdoor shop in an American town, and roughly half of that is now sitting on shelves in the form of objects. Which brings us to the part nobody warned you about. Subscribe if you're enjoying this, because the next section is where the whole business actually gets decided. Here's what makes gear retail different from every other kind of shop you might open. You don't buy your inventory when you need it. You buy it 6 to 12 months before you need it, at trade shows, from a rep with a catalog and an order deadline. The independent buying shows run twice a year, timed to those deadlines. You sit down in June and you commit real money to what you think your customers will want the following spring. Not what they want. What they'll want. 11 months out. And you're guessing on 4 dimensions at once. Which brands, which styles, which sizes, which colors. Get any one of them wrong, and that money doesn't come back at full price. It comes back at 30% off, then 50, then 70. In a clearance rack by the door that every regular customer learns to walk straight to. Now put that against the round trip. Dick's Sporting Goods turned its inventory about 2.5 times in its most recent full fiscal year. Specialty shops with deeper, slower, more technical product generally do worse. So every dollar you put into this business gets to go to work roughly twice a year. Twice. That's how many chances that dollar has to earn. A restaurant buys food on Monday and sells it Thursday. A gear shop buys a jacket in June and sells it in February if it's lucky, and if it isn't, sells it in July for half. This is the whole thing. This is the business. You are not in the business of selling gear. You are in the business of getting your own money back. And there's someone standing between you and that money. Every brand on your wall has a website. 10 years ago, that website was a catalog. Today, it's a store, and it is open 24 hours a day, and it is selling the exact product you have hanging 4 feet from where you're standing. The formal arrangement is a minimum advertised price policy. You sign on as a dealer, you agree not to advertise below the floor the brand sets, and in exchange, everybody competes on service instead of price. That's the theory, and when it works, it genuinely does protect small shops. Retailers have written publicly about what happens when it doesn't. A brand runs a weekend promotion on its own site, below the price its dealers are contractually barred from advertising. Emails go out, social posts go up. The sale runs, the customers move, and by the time a dealer calls to ask what happened, the answer is that someone on the direct-to-consumer side made an unauthorized change, and it's been addressed. The apology is free. The weekend sales are not, and neither is the customer who just learned that the brand's own site is cheaper than the shop down the street. You did the fitting. You did the 40-minute conversation. You carried the inventory for 11 months, and the transaction happened somewhere else, which is roughly what killed one of the most beloved gear shops in the country. Rod Johnson opened Midwest Mountaineering in Minneapolis in 1970. He was a climber, a paddler, an ultralight backpacker so committed to going cheap that his preferred sleeping pad was bubble wrap. He built the store into an institution, a bouldering wall, a hiking museum, a Boy Scout troop headquartered in the building, employees sent on company-funded trips to test gear, and a motto printed on everything the shop owned. Ask us. We've been there. At its peak, the store had around 100 employees. By 2023, it had 40. Sales had been sliding for 7 straight years, interrupted only by the pandemic, when everyone briefly remembered the outdoors existed. That spring, the reliable seasonal bump didn't come. It went the other way. He'd lost money every month that year. When the July statement landed, he called it. Johnson told a reporter he figured it was better to quit while he was ahead than to slowly bleed to death. In his announcement, he named the reasons plainly: big box, online, and manufacturers selling direct. Then he liquidated close to $2 million of gear at 30 to 75% off. The line to get in stretched down the block, around the corner, for days. 53 years, and the going out of business sale was the busiest the store had been in a decade. Rod Johnson died in October of 2025. He was 76. Now, the ugly one. Backcountry.com was founded in 1996 by 2 skiers selling avalanche beacons out of a garage in Park City, Utah. Great story. Real gearheads, famously good customer service, a goat for a logo. In 2015, it was bought by a private equity firm. In 2018, it launched its own house brand. And starting around 2017, it hired one of the country's largest trademark law firms and went hunting for the word. Not competitors. The word. Backcountry. It filed federal lawsuits and dozens of petitions to cancel existing trademarks, and it mailed cease and desist letters to small businesses across the country whose only offense was using a term that describes a place. A canned coffee company in Boulder called Backcountry Nitro, run by 2 friends off a Kickstarter, rebranded as Wild Barn Coffee, and nearly went under doing it. One of the founders walked away when the threat of a lawsuit hit her inbox. A nonprofit that taught women's avalanche safety courses under the name Backcountry Babes got hit. So did a one-man ski manufacturer in Michigan, who turned out to be the only target who refused to settle. Then it reached the internet. A boycott group formed and passed 20,000 members. On November 6, 2019, the CEO published an apology, said the company had made a mistake, fired the law firm, dropped the suit against the ski maker, and started calling the people his lawyers had spent 2 years threatening. Here's how it ends. In September of 2024, Backcountry was sold to a company that describes its specialty as acquiring retailers in financial distress. The giant that spent 2 years suing shops over a word became an asset in somebody's turnaround portfolio. Now the cost that doesn't show up on any line item. Summit Hut opened in Tucson in 1967, started by two teenagers who took special orders for backpacking gear because there was nowhere else in southern Arizona to get it. Dana Davis was hired there as a sales clerk right out of college in the late 90s. She worked nearly every job in the building. In 2011, she and her husband Jeremy bought it. In August of 2025, they closed it. 58 years. In the announcement, they listed what beat them: rising costs, brands going direct, big box, price pressure, and customers who'd shifted to shopping on a screen. And then Dana Davis said something to a local reporter that I haven't been able to put down. She said she'd have to brush up her resume, because this is all she'd done for the last 27 years. That's the thing about a gear shop. The expertise is the product. Knowing that this boot runs narrow, that this bag sleeps cold, that the trail she's asking about washed out in March, that knowledge takes 15 years to build, and it has almost no resale value anywhere else. Meanwhile, the median retail salesperson in this country makes $16.62 an hour. Your staff are not paid what they know. Nobody in this industry is. They're paid retail, and they stay because they love it, and the entire specialty channel runs on that gap. So at this point, you'd expect me to tell you independent gear shops are dying. They're not. And the reason why is the most interesting number in this entire video. The Grassroots Outdoor Alliance is a retailer-owned group of more than 100 independent outdoor businesses running over 225 stores across 45 states. They collect real sales data from their members, and in 2026, they published a decade of it. Comparable store sales across the membership grew 2.88% in 2025 and 4.89% through the first 5 months of 2026, with growth in every single month. In 2024, 59% of member stores were shrinking. By 2025, that was down to 37%. And in a subset wired into their point-of-sale program, units sold were up 4.5%, meaning customers weren't just paying more because of tariffs. They were buying more things. Over the same stretch, the broader athletic and sporting goods channel saw units fall more than 7%. REI lost $311 million in 2023, $156 million in 2024, $54 million in 2025, and is closing its stores in Soho, Boston, and Paramus. The little shops are outperforming the giants, and here's the part that should genuinely change how you think about this business. Across 10 years, 32 member stores reached a sale or closure moment. 22 of them found a new owner, a 2/3 continuity rate, and 14 of those went to employees, customers, or family. Only 10 closed outright over an entire decade, roughly 1 per year. And of those 10, the group's president attributed 4 primarily to one specific cause. Not Amazon, not big box, not brands going direct. Overextending into online and third-party marketplace selling. He called it the most damaging source of financial distress he's seen in the channel. Read that again. The most common way to kill an independent gear shop is to try to become a website. Which brings us to Portland. Next Adventure was opened in 1997 by 2 childhood friends, Deke Haykamp and Brian Knudsen. It grew to 4 locations. In May of 2025, they announced they were retiring and closing all of it, and they started the liquidation sale. Then an investor group came forward. That deal ran for months and collapsed, and somewhere in the middle of watching their own store get taken apart, the 2 of them changed their minds. In June of 2026, they announced Next Adventure would stay open. Under them, smaller. Down to the flagship on Southeast Grand and a seasonal store out in Sandy. Haykamp's explanation was one sentence. They got too big, and they'd been spending their time on things that weren't fun. The model they kept is the interesting part. New gear, closeouts, trade-ins, consignment, and a basement full of used equipment that has been the store's calling card for a quarter century. Because used gear is quietly becoming the thing that saves these stores. Roughly 23% of Grassroots members had a used section in 2023. By the end of 2025, it was 28%, with a dozen more adding 1. Stores that add it typically watch it grow past 10% of total volume within 2 years, And, this is the key finding, it mostly brings in new customers rather than eating the new gear business. A shop in Pittsburgh has been running consignment since 2018 and now does about a fifth of its sales in secondhand. A website can sell you a jacket. A website cannot take your old one. So let's run the actual numbers. Say you open a shop, $280,000 all in, half of it inventory. You do $600,000 in sales in year 2 at a 45% gross margin. That's $270,000 in gross profit. Occupancy eats $60. Payroll for you and 2 part-timers eats $140. Insurance, systems, freight, cards, marketing, and shrink take another $40. You're at $30,000 before taxes, working 60 hours a week with $250,000 of your own money sitting on shelves in the form of jackets. Now the version that works. Same store, but you add a used gear program in year 2, you stop chasing online orders you can't fulfill profitably, and you specialize hard. Boots and fitting, or paddle, or split boards, whatever your zip code actually does. Sales climb to $900,000. Used gear runs at a much stronger margin because you didn't buy it, you took it in. Blended margin goes to 50%. You're at $110,000 to $140,000 in owner's income, and you've stopped placing quite so much of the 11-month bet. And then the median version. You open with too much money in the wrong brands. You discover that the brands you built the store around are running their own sales. You try to fix it by putting everything on a website where you are competing with companies that have distribution centers, and 30 months in, you're the one running the going out of business sale that's the busiest day you've ever had. Here's what all of this actually adds up to. Outdoor recreation is not a small business in America. Federal accounts put it at more than $1.3 trillion in economic output, roughly 2.5% of the entire national economy. A record 183 million Americans got outside in 2025. 59% of everyone over the age of 5, nearly 30 million more people than in 2019. But they're going less often. Americans took about 11.9 billion outings last year, which works out to roughly 65 trips per participant. In 2012, that number was over 87. That's the market you're walking into. More customers than ever before, and each one of them needs you less than the last generation did. They're newer, more casual, and they need one jacket, not a system. And that is exactly why the good shops are winning while the giants bleed. A casual customer who has never bought a sleeping bag doesn't need a warehouse. They need a person. So no, an outdoor gear shop is not a good investment. The capital requirement is brutal, the money moves twice a year, the brands you depend on compete with you directly, and the expertise that makes it work is the least transferable asset in American retail. But it's also one of the only businesses left where the durable advantage is a human being standing on a floor. The gear will always be cheaper somewhere else. It was cheaper somewhere else in 1998. That was never the product. The product is a person who has slept in that bag, on that mountain, in that weather, and can tell you before you spend the money whether it's going to be enough. Rod Johnson figured that out in 1970 and printed it on the wall for 53 years. Ask us. We've been there. That's the whole business. Everything else is inventory. Next up, what it actually costs to open a climbing gym. Because it turns out the answer involves concrete insurance underwriters who've read the injury statistics, and one building code most owners don't find out about until the inspector shows up.